How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, we're going to be doing the ultimate guide to the ultimate game week 38. So yes, the final game week of the season. Happy, sad emotions currently flowing through me. Not been the best season in the world for my own personal squad, but I've thoroughly enjoyed the unpredictability this season has entailed, as well as the engagement that we have had on this channel throughout the season. So in this video, the talking points are going to largely revolve around the fixtures, as well as differential punts that you guys can take on, because in game week 38, we're trying to make up the most space as possible in those mini leagues, in those overall ranks, in as little time as possible with one single game week. So throughout the video, we're going to be touching on punts that you can go for in terms of free transfers and captaincy, as well as doing a thorough analysis of the fixtures before finally choosing those punts that I think could be quite profitable. So if that's something you're interested in, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So going over a little bit of a quick admin, I wanted to give you guys an update and just run some things through you guys and ask for some feedback. So the first thing is the deadline stream, which I don't think anyone is going to be against. It's just going to be the usual deadline with Dayvy live stream that we do have every single deadline this season. So that's going to be a great thing. Hopefully you guys are there so that we can kind of wrap up this season in a good fashion with the deadline stream for game week 38. But then the thing that I am thinking about doing is the same as what I did last season, is kind of doing a match of the day challenge. So what that entails is that I won't be watching any of the fixtures on Sunday afternoon, and then I will be doing a live reaction stream just to kind of wrap up the season, to give some good closure to our own FPL squad and to show you guys where I do end up finishing. So if you guys think that's a good idea, drop it in the comments down below. Otherwise, maybe give me some suggestions of what you think would be a better idea to do besides doing a match of the day and final reaction stream to this FPL season. Now moving on to the first talking point of the video, which I think is going to be quite a prevalent factor in game week 38, and that's going to be hits. Should you guys be taking hits at this stage of the season? How many hits should you be taking, if any, and what to kind of do with those free transfers? So on the thing of hits, the thing I will say to you is always kind of my thinking behind hits. And if I do take a hit for a specific player, one, if I captain them, it kind of makes it lower risk of them not returning, and two, if you give yourself the maximum amount of game weeks to make up that hit, that is always better. And obviously in a last game week of the season, game week 38, the second point there of giving yourself as much time as possible is greatly reduced, and that of course increases the risk. But I wouldn't be totally against hits. As I mentioned, if you're going to be captaining the player you bring in, maybe you don't own a Mohamed Salah and you want to bring him in for a hit and captain him, that's specifically a good thing to do, and I would kind of suggest that if you're going to be going for a good captaincy option. But then on terms of just the free transfers, I would suggest that if you honestly don't have any players on your bench that have good fixtures, and the player that you're bringing in your mind has a really good chance of repaying the hit, I would recommend to you guys that you do think about what -4 points is. For a defender, it's basically all their clean sheet points, and for an attacker, it's basically a goal. So that's something to just keep in mind. If you do think the player you're going to bring in will get a clean sheet or a goal more than the player you're taking out, then that's perfectly fine. And at this stage of the season, game week 38, you have your goals in mind. You might be happy with your rank, not happy with your rank. That's going to be all situational to your own self. And I would say maybe you want a little bit of fun at this stage of the season. I'm all for it. So that doesn't mean taking a -4 to get a completely new starting 11, but I would just suggest be responsible when you do take hits. So now moving on to the big talking point of the video, and that's going to be everything about the fixture. So firstly, I'm going to be doing my rundown on each game and telling you what my kind of prediction is for it and what assets you should be looking at from which specific teams. And then we'll be going on to some fantasyfootballhub.co.uk ratings for the attack and the defense, so you guys can know the probabilities of that team doing quite well. But starting off with the fixture review, as I always do, I've gone with the green arrows on the side of the teams that I do favor, and we'll talk about those as we go through the fixture. So the first off fixture, Arsenal-Brighton. This game is going to be quite a hard one to call, and that's why I wouldn't be going for either of these two teams. Brighton defensively look okay, and then Arsenal have actually picked up a little bit of form right now towards the end of the season. So this game is a little bit too hard to call, but I would be avoiding it for potential punts. The next game, now this game could have the potential from a Chelsea point of view, but we saw with Jack Grealish back in that lineup just how better Aston Villa looked. Maybe it was that Spurs looked absolutely atrocious. That could also be a good case, but I do think this Villa game, Chelsea game will be quite a hard one to call. I think those Chelsea assets don't look that bad, mainly the defenders, maybe an attacker you could look at, but if you're looking for that maximum potential, that maximum high ceiling, I would look elsewhere. Newcastle, Fulham, this game I think is going to be a pretty boring one, to be honest. Although as a Joe Willock owner, if you guys are one of those owners, a Gucci, say, maximum owner, I mean, I wouldn't be too hindered by this fixture, but I don't think I'd be bringing those assets in, because I think with Fulham at home, probably want to put on a good show for their faithful after being relegated. So I think this game probably will be quite a close one, so I wouldn't look at that one. But now we go on to the assets that I am looking forward to owning and maybe even bringing in. And that first game, Leeds versus West Brom, I think the Leeds fans are going to go absolutely mental at their home ground on Sunday afternoon, and you can see why. I mean, Leeds have had a great season back in the Premier League after a long time. They're going to be in the Prem next season, so their fans are going to want to show their praise for their players, and I think that Leeds are going to put on a good show for their fans as well against West Bromwich Albion. I think this game is going to be a high scoring one, maybe not too many clean sheets in Leeds versus West Brom, but I think a lot of goals definitely, and that's why those assets are red hot in my opinion, and you guys should be focusing on them if you want to take some differential punts. The next fixture, Leicester Spurs. Now this game is different, not from a fan's point of view, but because Leicester have to win if they want any chance of that Champions League. And the thing about Spurs is that they looked absolutely horrendous in the midweek, so I don't think they're going to be putting too much battle against that Leicester attack. So I play like an Ian Nacho. If you still own a Jamie Vardy, I think I would be quite confident in those assets returning. I don't know if I'd be looking at too many clean sheets, because you must remember Harry Kane is still on that golden boot run, and I'm pretty sure this game will be quite an interesting one. But I think that those Leicester assets, if you have them, I would keep hold of them, because I do think they should get a couple past Spurs. Then the next game, Liverpool Crystal Palace, probably going to be the most popular team this week in terms of assets for FPL, because Liverpool versus Crystal Palace is going to be quite predictable in my opinion. Similar to Leicester, home fans, something is on the line. I think those Liverpool assets are going to be quite good and quite profitable from a defense and an attacking point of view. Now Crystal Palace, this is Roy Hodgson's last game, but I think that fixture was probably last game week where they were at home, and I think that's going to be kind of the send-off to Roy Hodgson, and I think that Liverpool should put a couple past Crystal Palace, and this should be a good result. And as I mentioned, it's all on the line in front of those home fans. I think it's going to be rocking at Anfield on Sunday afternoon, and I think our FPL teams should be rocking if we do have a couple of Liverpool assets. We got Man City Everton. Now while I do think this game could be quite a good game for Man City, they're going to want to prepare for that Champions League final against Chelsea and put on a good showing, and I think that overall Pep Guardiola will play quite a strong lineup. I just can't really suggest going with a Man City option, captaincy, bringing them in anyways, just because there is that risk of rotation. And that's kind of the sad thing about Man City, is that they have such a high ceiling, but in terms of actually playing the games, I don't know if I would be going for a punt in the last game week of the season, just picking up a Man City attacker that might not start. From an Everton point of view, a fixture against Man City is never good, so I don't think this Everton assets are going to be too great. You could always hold on to them and maybe hope that Man City get a red card, because it seems like with 10 men, like any squad, they do not defend that well. So maybe those Everton assets could get lucky, but I wouldn't be banking on it. Then we have Sheffield United, Burnley. Now previously in this season, if I looked at this fixture, I probably would have bet on a 0-0 game here, because I mean Burnley, Sheffield United looks absolutely terrible on paper, but now that we got into the mix of this end of the season, we actually can see that Burnley are quite an attacking squad, and Sheffield United are absolutely terrible. Now they are playing at home, and I'm pretty sure they'll want to put on a good showing for their fans since they are now relegated, so it's going to be quite interesting to see what plays out here. But I think those Burnley assets are definitely where some point returns could come from. Maybe not the high ceiling in the world, but I still think those assets could do well, and I think from a defensive and attacking point of view, they could be quite attractive. Then we go on to West Ham, Southampton. Now I think this game should have a couple of goals in it. As I said, not too many clean sheets, but I think the goals will be flowing here. So Lingard, Antonio, those could be options that I do look at. And the final game, United Wolves. Now if I was to pick a favorite in this game, obviously it's going to be United, but I just don't know how high scoring this game is going to be. Wolves also at home. You can see here that I'm quite heavily favorable of the home fixtures, and I think this is probably the first game of the season that I've actually given advantage to the home team, because obviously fans haven't been returned, but I think the fans are going to be a large pool in this game week, and that's why I think those United Wolves assets, maybe you don't look at them too much, but especially those United assets, I don't know if I'd be looking at keeping them or even bringing them in, but we will talk about Bruno Fernandes a little bit later on. But now let's go on and look at the attacking ratings. So now going over the attacking ratings of Fantasy Football Hub, and this is basically on goals for the team. And as you can see here, Leeds are top there against West Bromwich Albion, and I think that is rightfully so. I think it's quite close between them and Liverpool, and I think that game will be quite close in the end. But what's interesting to see is that Fulham are also quite highly rated, but obviously I think this takes the entire season as a whole, and a Newcastle side that hasn't been great defensively, but I don't know how many punts I would be taking on those Fulham assets. But the top three are basically that I'll be looking at: Leeds, Liverpool and West Ham. I think all those assets have a relatively good chance of returning, and then you can also see that Burnley there at that 6th spot, also with the 1.9 rating. So those teams look quite good, and those are probably going to be the teams that I would focus on if you guys do want to take some punts on some differentials, and maybe even go for some captaincy decisions on those top three teams of Leeds, Liverpool and West Ham United. The other fixtures, you can kind of go through this, pause the video if you want right now. I'm not going to touch on it too much because everything's basically in front of you guys, and you can just do some reading on your own if you are interested in a specific team. The next up is the defense, and now while the defense might not be as great or have as high a ceiling as the attack, I do think the defense is quite important to look at. So you guys, maybe if you're having some team selection issues, some benching issues, you can just kind of go on this talking point and these ratings and then select the players and the teams that you please. But first off, we got Liverpool here with a 0.4 chance of a clean sheet against Crystal Palace, and I think that is quite a good favourable fixture to go for from those Liverpool defenders. And the nice thing about those Liverpool defenders, like a Robertson, like a Trent, they also offer that massive attacking threat. So I think those Liverpool options, if you are maybe on a free hit, I would consider going for a Robertson and a Trent both, because I think the Crystal Palace game is a clean sheet threat and an attacking threat for both of those defenders. Fulham game, I don't know if I'll be taking too much of a punt on those Fulham defenders, but Leeds are also quite attractive because obviously we have Stuart Dallas there who's playing out of position anyway. So he's not even a defender, but he gets a clean sheet if they do keep one, and I think that he's definitely going to be one of those players on my mind and could even maybe provide a differential captain if you guys want to go for him. Also Burnley, Sheffield United, all these kind of teams are quite predictable. I don't know how much of that West Ham Southampton game is going to lead to a clean sheet, so I think that I would definitely focus on maybe a couple of teams. This might be one of those game weeks where instead of going for a split defense, you go for a double up with specific squads that you think have a good chance of keeping a clean sheet. But as I mentioned with the attack, just pause the video right now if you want to go for a specific squad. But now let's go on and talk about another talking point. So now, what are we going to do with Bruno Fernandes? I personally don't own him, but if you guys do own him, what should you be doing? Another thing I will mention about Bruno Fernandes is even if he doesn't touch the ball, he does get an assist. Only joking there. Just a little bit of banter there about that decision of FPL on the weekend. But with Bruno Fernandes, I would probably be taking Bruno out if it's to bring in someone like a Mo Salah and you want to captain him, or you want to take a punt on maybe someone like a Sadio Mane. I think that's quite a good option to go for, but I don't think it's the worst decision in the world to just keep Bruno Fernandes. I mean, Wolves haven't been great this season. United are going to look to bounce back after that draw they had against Fulham. So, I mean, Bruno's stats are looking quite good. It's almost differential at this point to keep Bruno Fernandes because I've seen so many people taking him out for other punts, taking him out for Sadio Mane. But I think in terms of the stats, I mean, a Bruno Fernandes probably has a better chance of returning than a Sadio Mane does. But what to do? It's a really tricky decision to go for. I don't think I'd be prioritizing the Bruno transfer out unless you guys do really want to bring in a Mo Salah and captain him, for example, or as I mentioned, bring in a Sadio Mane. Those are probably the only two players that I would take Bruno out for, and the main reason for that is that the punts for this week, the differentials for this week are relatively cheap. So you guys can take out maybe a Calvert-Lewin instead of a Bruno and take a punt on a Firmino or go for a Bamford, that sort of thing. So all the punts and the differentials that I think this week are quite cheap. So you don't even need the funds to take a Bruno out. And I think, as I said, maybe even a differential at this point if you do manage to hold on to the Portuguese midfielder, because a lot of people are shipping him out before game week 38. Now going on to the differentials, which is probably going to be the talking point that you guys clicked on this video for. Kind of everyone wants that differential that's going to get them a hat-trick in game week 38 and propel them up the ranks and the mini leagues in one single game week. So I've gone for 3 teams / 3 players here. I'll be mentioning the players that I also think from these specific teams that could also be differential, but these are the main players that I want to talk about. So first off, we got Firmino from Liverpool. So with Firmino, he's kind of counteracted with Sadio Mane Mane, but I wanted to go for Firmino because he's more of a differential, less people are talking about him, and he does offer a different position. And the thing that I'm currently in is I don't want a Calvert-Lewin, for example, because he has a bad fixture against Man City. So maybe if I wanted to look for a forward, I could still go for a player like a Firmino. And I think at this stage, the Liverpool lineup's going to be pretty predictable. The only thing I wanted to mention about a potential player that could also be great is going to be Oxlade-Chamberlain. Whenever Ox plays for Liverpool, he seems to score, and we saw that when he came on late against Burnley. The only thing though is that I don't know if he's going to be starting in that starting 11, but if he does, he provides a nice option. So maybe what you guys can do is just wait for those lineups. Maybe we get some early team news. All the teams are playing at the same time. So maybe if Ox is rumored to start, then I would potentially look at him, because I think that means that Klopp wants to go for an attacking lineup, and I think that he provides a nice little alternative in the midfield. I also mentioned Sadio Mane, but I just keep on remembering that miss he had last night against Burnley, and I just thought to myself, as I tweeted earlier on, I just don't know where he's been this season. Hasn't had a great season overall, and I think that maybe a player like a Firmino seems to be one of those streaky players. Scored last night. I reckon that he could score against Crystal Palace, and that's why I think at that price point he provides a nice little differential. So Firmino is firmly on my radar, and I would probably say is my favorite differential this week if you guys do want to go for it, just because, as I mentioned, that Liverpool assets, they're going to be riled up, the fans are going to be pumping. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere at Anfield on the weekend, so I think those Liverpool assets do look quite good. Then the next team is going to be Burnley, and as we mentioned, Sheffield United, if not the best fixture, one of the best fixtures in this season. So I mean, a Chris Wood could be a nice option. It's a little bit sad that this game isn't at Burnley's home stadium, because as you saw last night against Liverpool, those Burnley fans were absolutely sensational. They were getting on the end of the referee, they were getting on the end of the opponents, they were complaining about anything and everything, exactly what you want from those home fans. But now they travel to Sheffield United, and I don't know how great that atmosphere is going to be for Burnley. But the thing about Wood that is quite positive is that his stats have been really good overall, and I think that Burnley attack has looked quite good as well. The nice thing about Wood is that he isn't going to be rotated, and the main reason for that is that Ashley Barnes was charged with drunk driving, I think, or potentially charged. So don't quote me on that, but I don't think he's going to be playing on the weekend anyway. So I mean, if you're worried about rotation, don't, because Chris Wood will definitely be playing. So I mean, those Burnley assets, it's been quite a shift in that team that we've seen. Usually defensively we're relying on them, but now from an attacking point of view, they actually look quite good. And the thing about Chris Wood is that he's less owned than I think the majority of people think. I think he's about that 5% ownership in the top 10k, 100k, might be more of a percentage owned there, but I do think from a differential point of view, Wood provides quite a nice attacking option. Then the final team is probably my second favorite team to go for in this Game Week 38 fixture, and as I mentioned, similar to Liverpool, I think that the Leeds stadium is going to be absolutely pumping, and I reckon those Leeds assets are definitely going to bang. A lot of goals in this one, so that's why I think Harrison is a player that I would be looking at. And the also reason I'm talking about Harrison over maybe a player like a Rodrigo is a lot of people own Bamford and Rafinha, and they seem to think that a double up is enough for Leeds, and I would say that I think a triple up is probably where you should be looking at for Game Week 38, and Harrison perfectly complements Bamford and Rafinha because basically you're covering all your bases. I know there are other options from Leeds that could score, mainly Dallas, but I think if you want to go for a Harrison, that's a perfectly good differential to go for, and at about that 6% ownership, still provides quite a low ownership that you guys can maybe take a punt on. So I think Harrison should be a great option that you guys do look at, and as I mentioned, that Leeds stadium is going to be pumping, and I think that Leeds are going to do quite well against West Bromwich Albion. So now moving on to the final talking point of this week, it's going to be the captaincy debate. And as you can see on screen here, it's basically Mo Salah versus the world, because everyone's going to be going for Mo Salah. If you guys want to go differential, there's some nice fixtures, but I definitely think on paper, a Liverpool asset is probably who you want to captain. I mean, a Sadio Mane, a Firmino, those players will be quite lowly captained. So if you want to still be quite safe but differential, I think that a Mane or a Firmino is perfectly fine, but I definitely think Salah is the best option to go for. So it's going to be quite a hard week, because you might have to differentiate yourself from the best option hands down, just to kind of climb those mini leagues and those ranks. But if you want to go differential, you got to look at a player like an Antonio or a Bamford, in my opinion. You could always chop and change her, go for a Lingard or a Rafinha, but I think these are the two main talisman for those specific teams. So I think these options provide quite a safe differential route. Bamford, I've already spoken about that West Brom fixture enough, and how I think that the Leeds team's going to do well. But then we also have West Ham, and you can see here that I've favored the home fixtures, and I mentioned earlier on that it's one of those weird game weeks where this is probably the first game week this season that the home fixture actually mean something. I think the fans are going to be quite good, and the players are going to want to put on a good show in front of their fans. So I think the home fixtures are definitely the fixtures that you guys should be targeting. West Ham have Southampton, who have been bad defensively. So I mean, any of these three options, I kind of have faith in returning. It's just going to be kind of which one returns the most. And I keep on going back to Salah because I just think out of all the game weeks to captain Mo Salah, this has to be a week that you do it, as he is racing for that golden boot. But now let's get on and look at the predictions. So the fantasyfootballhub.co.uk prediction tool actually largely agrees with me. You can see there Mo Salah, hands down the best option to go for, predicted 8.6 points for game week 38, and the next option is going to be Bamford. There were a couple of players between here, including the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold and also Sadio Mane, but I kind of wanted to choose one player per team. So that's why we got Salah, Bamford, Antonio, and also Iheanacho. Included Iheanacho here because I wanted to touch on the fact that I said that I think that Leicester should actually have a good game against Spurs. So if you guys do still have a player like Vardy and Iheanacho, I would hold on to them. Then you also have Bamford, Antonio, my other options that I would potentially look at, but obviously they have a lower predicted points than Mo Salah, just because I think that, as I mentioned, hands down the best option to go for. So it's going to be a really hard week to go for differential because you could be punished, but if you guys do go really differential, I really do praise your courage. So this is basically a wrap of the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you have not subscribed yet. Also, feedback on that potential reaction stream that I wanted to do would be appreciated. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in the team selection coming up tomorrow or on Saturday. I'm going to be signing off. This has been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.